and maybe there will be a few more people joining. And yeah, maybe I would like to keep this like very informal and a bit shorter and lightweighted, more like than the last call we had. The last call was a bit more technical. This one I would like to use to like introduce Colton basically, or he had already like was on this call already, and we hired him 3 weeks ago. He started, and it's a great pleasure to have you on our team. And maybe just a quick bio and introduction on you. So basically, you're now our head of growth. You used to work. So Colton used to work as like an ecosystem and community manager at Stellar, and yeah, he worked there for more than a year, and then he joined Liquity. Previously, Colton was working in the esports industry, like at Armada Esports as a social media coordinator, and also he did a lot of video editing and graphics design. So Colton is really a very well-rounded head of growth with skills in many different areas, like ranging from design, UX, copywriting, technical writing, and so on. And I'm really happy to have him on board. You have maybe already get him to know on Discord, where he's now managing our community, and also on Twitter. So it's a great pleasure to have him here. Yeah, and maybe I can just give you like the chance to say a few words.
I mean, yeah, that was a pretty good intro. I won't talk about myself too long. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to join the team. I've been in the space for a while, so it's cool to work on a project pre-launch, especially like right before launch. So everything's like ramping up really quickly. We've been heads down over the past couple of weeks since I joined, which some of that stuff we'll be sharing today. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of stuff in store, so it'll be cool. If anybody ever has any questions or anything, just feel free to always reach out to me. I'll be available. But yeah, I don't want to talk about myself too much. I don't like it. So I know Robert has some stuff to present regarding a change we made to recovery mode. So we can pass it back to you and move on with the agenda.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I will just share my screen, and this will be a short presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Let me present. Okay, so as Colton mentioned, we did a few changes to our recovery mode, which are pretty important from a UX perspective and also from a system health perspective. And I would like to walk you through those changes. But before delving into the details, just a quick recap for those who may not be as familiar with our protocol than others. We have like our very own liquidation mechanism in Liquity, which is quite different from other DeFi projects, which do liquidations through auctions or sell-offs. We, on the other hand, we have this two-step process. We have a stability pool, which where we have our LUSD token piled up, and it can be used to basically repay the debt that needs to be liquidated, and then the collateral from the position or from the borrower who is liquidated is then sent to the stability pool as a reward for whoever deposited tokens to the pool. So that's our main liquidation mechanism. We also have a fallback, which is called a redistribution, and that means that the debt and collateral from the person who is liquidated is just given proportionally to all the other borrowers in the system. Like larger borrowers receive a slightly larger debt and collateral shares. And this happens if the pool is empty. So we first try to liquidate against the stability pool. If it gets emptied or is empty already, then we fall back to the redistribution. Now, this is like the happy path or the normal way we liquidate loans. But there is like this kind of special mode, which would be triggered if the total collateralization of the entire system, like if you can imagine that's the total debt, the total collaterals value divided by the total debt, if that ratio drops below 150%, the system would then enter recovery mode, during which the liquidation mechanism changes a little bit. So the main difference here is that while in the normal case, like as long as the system as a whole is healthy, we would only liquidate individual borrowers if their own collateralization ratio drops below 110%. But during recovery mode, this rule gets relaxed a little bit, and that's where we did a few changes, and I will walk you through them now. We had an old approach, the one that is still in our current white paper, which we are going to update very soon. And this old approach basically was based on this very important, or this principle that we would only liquidate in ascending order of collateralization ratio. You see here a number of troves, like our positions, they are called troves. Blue is the collateral, red is the debt, like the collateral is always slightly larger than the debt, as it should be. And they are sorted by collateralization ratio. So this one is like largely over collateralized. This one is very risky. And now, as I mentioned, as long as our system is in this normal mode, like it's healthy, the total collateralization is above 150%, we would only liquidate positions below 110%. But then if there is this kind of bad case where the total collateralization drops below 150%, the system would enter recovery mode, and we would allow liquidation up to 150%. And given this rule here that liquidation only happens in ascending order of collateral ratio, this means that we would just start liquidating with this position, like whoever calls the liquidate function or sends a liquidate transaction to our system, this would start liquidating this borrower, like the one with the lowest collateral ratio. And once this is liquidated, it would go to the next one, and so on. So you cannot skip this kind of order. This is relatively nice for the borrowers who are up here, because as we start liquidating the loans, like the ones, the riskiest ones, the system's total collateralization ratio would improve, because we are basically clearing off the bad debt and we are leaving in the system the good debt. So the average collateralization should improve. So you're still protected, or as a borrower here, maybe. I mean, at some point the system would switch back to normal mode. So this was our old approach. We wanted to have this kind of order in our system to prevent arbitrary liquidations and to protect those borrowers who are a bit higher up the scale. But it turned out that this would be a bit risky, because even though our liquidations are relatively gas efficient, you can liquidate up to 40% positions with one single transaction. But despite that, it would be still risky to allow or to stick to this rule, because if there is an attacker who creates like thousands or 10,000s of such small troves, and the ones with a very low collateral ratio, then the attacker could basically build a wall here, like at the very bottom end of our sorted list of troves, so that it would take really long until liquidators could get to reach like the high juicy, the big positions that need to be liquidated. So that's why we changed this, and we are now allowing arbitrary liquidations. Like, of course, only those liquidations are possible that are either below the 110%, or in recovery mode, we also change it now that only positions whose collateral ratio is below this total collateralization ratio would be liquidatable. So you can think of this TCR as the average. So instead of just having a 150% here, it somehow makes sense to only allow those positions to be liquidated that are below the average, because that's what we want in recovery mode, where basically by liquidating the lower tier or this lower half of positions, the system's average would improve. So this is one change we did. So you see here, it used to be 150%. Now it's slightly lower than that, because the TCR per definition needs to be lower than 150% in order to trigger recovery mode. And this now allows, so here we are now allowing arbitrary liquidations. So the liquidators can pick the largest troves, the juicy troves, so that like the whole system would be much quicker to liquidate a larger portion of the debt, which is very important because the whole system critically relies on the speed of liquidation. And on the other hand, I mean, that would now be a bit bad from a borrower's perspective, because now if borrowers would lose like their entire collateral in case of a liquidation, and that would even happen to borrowers that are like just slightly below the TCR, let's say at 145%, now they would lose 45% of basically value because they have a debt of 100 and the collateral of 145. So that wouldn't be a very bad, a very good borrower experience. So that's why we introduced a nice feature here is, and that we are now capping liquidation, or the loss basically that somebody incurs if his or her position is liquidated. We now cap it at 110% of the debt. So this is basically like to account for the fact that you can now be liquidated maybe even higher up the list than in our initial version, according to the white paper. So you see here, I mean, I'm just presenting it like in a very brief way. So we have basically the debt here of the borrower and still the collateral on this side. And now this borrower's position is slightly below the TCR and the system is in recovery mode here. We just assume that. So then what happens is that the borrower's collateral is now subject to liquidation. And this part, which is basically below the 110% line, would be sent to the stability pool as a reward to the stability depositors, while this upper half here, like what's basically above the 110% and below the TCR, so this light blue part, would be made reclaimable. So the borrower could just use our UI to reclaim this remainder. And what he effectively loses is here this net loss. Like this 10% is the net loss of the borrower because his debt is cleared and he loses 110%. So the 10% difference is the loss. We only do this kind of liquidation of loans that are above 110% if they can be fully covered by the stability pool. So we are not doing redistributions in this scenario because that wouldn't really help the system to improve its total collateralization ratio. And yeah, here's just a summary. I won't go into the details, but what I just explained is this special case. So during recovery mode, there are a few cases. We still have this one, which is just a normal liquidation sequence, like for loans that are below 110%. We would do like the same procedure as during normal mode, but then we are also now liquidating those loans that are above 110%. And there is also a specialty for those that are below 100%, but I will skip that now. And then there is one more thing that we changed, which is, I think, also important to make the system a bit more streamlined or a bit more logical in the end, which is that initially, or the old approach was that we had like different restrictions during recovery mode when you wanted to increase your debt or when you wanted to withdraw collateral. And those depended on whether the system was already in recovery mode or only at the cusp of it, like in the sense that you would basically push the system into recovery mode by doing a certain operation, like by increasing your debt, by taking out new loan, or by withdrawing some of your collateral. And this turned out that those restrictions were not like path independent, which is basically the property that no matter the order in which you send the same transactions to the blockchain, the result or the resulting restrictions should be the same. So this wasn't really guaranteed in this old approach. So now we changed it to make it a little bit more rational. So now every operation on existing troves or loans, that we call them troves, that would basically decrease the total system collateralization ratio below this 150%, or just the resulting TCR is below 150%. In this case, it doesn't matter whether the system is already in recovery mode or only at the cusp of it. We are just not allowing those operations. Like if you basically do something that results in a decrease of the TCR and the TCR ends up being below 150%, then you are not allowed to do that. And the last special thing that we do want to allow and encourage is that we are allowing new troves, like new positions, to be created even during recovery mode, because during recovery mode, there is a chance that our LUSD token is overpriced because people are rushing to repay their loans because there is maybe like a scenario where people want to close their positions. So now we are allowing at least to open new positions if they are well collateralized, like well here means that they have a collateral ratio above 150%. And what we are also now just discussing is that we would not charge any fees. So those troves would be completely free of charge. So as a measure to encourage them. So that's it. I know it was maybe a lot of content within a short amount of time, but I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
So there's one question in the chat about, in recovery mode, what if there's not, enough LUSD in the stability pool to liquidate the trove fully? Rick kind of answered it, but we might want to read that answer out loud just so it's on the recording. So the answer is, in that case, the trove will not be liquidated, and so there's no more partial liquidations, and the stability pool LUSD must now fully cover the debt of the trove. If the trove is inside the middle of a batch liquidation transaction, it will just be skipped. So is there anything else to add to that?
Just to add that applies to the case where the ICR of the trove is above the MCR. If the ICR is below the MCR, then it's like it liquidates as much as possible with the stability pool, and the rest gets redistributed as in normal mode.
So that's, I think, here, right?
Sweet. Recovery mode is awesome. Well, hopefully we're not in recovery mode enough to know how awesome it is. So
we made it more awesome than it was before by introducing the 10% cap. So, I mean, the liquidation penalty, because you can also call it penalty in a way, is now always capped at 10%. So I think it's lower than on some other platforms.
Yeah, and somebody asked, I have a question around the incentives of the different participants. Yeah, go ahead, ask away.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation, and you're building super interesting stuff. So this is all very exciting. I guess my question is, I think, and excuse me if I get some of the assumptions wrong here, because I'm definitely not a modeling expert, but like one of the big appeal of the Liquity protocol, as I understand it, is that you can basically participate in it with a lower collateral ratio. So basically you can feel safe if you're, like, for example, your collateral ratio is at 120%, you're still on the good side. But at the same time, that if the overall collateral ratio of the system is below 150%, like you might still get liquidated. So what kind of like user behavior you anticipate in that regard, in terms of, do you think that people will feel safe with like a collateral ratio of that is below 150%? Because for their individual situations, it's okay, but for the overall system, it is not. That would be my first question. And then, kind of for the people that do choose to have a higher collateral ratio because they want to be on the safe side, like why would they choose a protocol where basically their destiny is kind of tied with the destiny of other people in the protocol that may have a kind of lower collateral ratios, where they can use MakerDAO and know that only their collateral ratio matters for what's going to happen to them. And again, just open-ended questions, because maybe I'm probably getting some of the things wrong, but I'm curious.
No, those are great questions. So I think we can quickly discuss them. So as your first question was like, what would we recommend, or what would be the expected user behavior? I think so. We would generally recommend to users to keep their collateral ratio above the 150%, but it's a little bit different now from other systems where you, like the moment where your collateral ratio would drop below the threshold, you would be subject to liquidation. So here it's different. So, I mean, even if you should keep your collateral ratio above 150% if you want to be on the safe side, I mean, there's still a very high chance that you're still on the safe side if it drops below 150, but still stays above 110, because it's only if like the whole collective, like a large enough number of borrowers just don't react as they should, only in that case you would be like liquidated, because only then the system would trigger recovery mode. So there will be like some dynamics here, like it's a little bit like a more collective or dynamic system than, let's say, MakerDAO. But if you compare the two, I think, I mean, now, okay, MakerDAO has like two types of Ether as collateral, but the original one, I think the ETH A is still at 150% minimum collateralization ratio, which means that their individual minimum is like our collective minimum, and our individual minimum is much lower. So, and as I said, like the 150% would be like not a hard like guillotine or hard like killer measure, I mean, most cases. So we think that it's still like overall a better risk, a benefit or risk ratio for the users.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Sweet. Are there any other questions? Yes. So Marcel asks, how would you deal with high demand for LUSD? DAI has a liquidity problem because of collateral. Even though required collateral is lower for Liquity, would you not still have a disadvantage over bonding curve emission?
Colton? Oh. So Colton, I think you dropped off. So maybe.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Marcel asked, how would you deal with high demand for LUSD? DAI has a liquidity problem because of the collateral, even though required collateral is lower for Liquity. Would you not still have a disadvantage over bonding curve emission?
So this is also a really great question. So, and this is something we don't have like a silver bullet for, because even though we can make loans cheaper, like we have this kind of fee mechanism where the fees would go down if there are no redemptions, which normally should happen if the LUSD price is above, like hovering above $1. So at some point the fees would be minimal or even 0%. Like that's still something we are now currently working on, the minimum fee. But anyway, like it is a bit difficult to make like new loans attractive if for some reason the market doesn't want to invest in Ether or leverage Ether. So this is a general problem which is also faced by Maker. Like the difference maybe here is that in our system we have, I would say, 2 extra mechanisms or 2 extra instruments that may help in this scenario. One of them is the fact that, I mean, there is this hard price ceiling at 110%. So, you know, above 110%, you can open a position, a trove, and take out the maximum amount of loan and sell your LUSD and just forget about your Ether, because even if it gets liquidated, you already made like an arbitrage gain. Like there is this kind of upper bound on the price at 110. And we think that with this upper bound already in place, there should be less speculation against LUSD, like because the speculation gains are already kept. And the other thing is that even if the price just like goes up a few cents above $1, the total leverage ratio that you can achieve also goes up. So it becomes more attractive to make or to benefit from leverage as the price of LUSD increases, which should also attract some maybe new users who want to do leverage. And last but not least, there could also be like an effect where the stability pool, I mean, it's filled up by LUSD. Now, let's say the price for some reason of LUSD goes up. Now, like the gains that you achieve through the liquidations, like as a stability pool depositor, they would go down because the exchange rate, like the LUSD is now worth more than $1. So what you get back in Ether is still measured against, or it's measured based on this $1-to-1 peg. So it would become less attractive to stay in the stability pool. And if people are now willing to take out their LUSD from the pool whenever LUSD is trading above the peg, this should lead to a higher circulating supply of LUSD, which normally leads to a lower price. So those are the mechanisms we have. They won't be foolproof, so we cannot guarantee that the price will never go beyond $1, but it's very unlikely that it would ever go exceed 110.
Cool. And one more question. It looks like that's a little forward thinking, I guess. Any plans on adding other synthetic assets to Mint instead of LUSD? I think the short answer is not right now, or at least not in the near term, but maybe you have some other stuff to add.
So yeah, synthetic assets in this case means that we would create some, like instead of creating a stable coin, we would create like an Apple or Google share, like a synthetic representation of it. I mean, that's not something we have on our like short-term list. What we are looking into a little bit is having like multi-currencies, like maybe issuing like an L euro or L GBP at some point, but that would be rather like a separate system. Like this one is closed system, so we cannot just add other currencies or other synthetic assets, but we are like we are open like on both sides, both in terms of collateral, like whether we want to accept like some other collateral in the future, like not in the near term, but rather in the longer term future. So that one is an option, and also like maybe some other currencies and maybe some like synthetic assets, but that's something we first want to see how this performs, like how Liquity, like this version 1 will play out, and then decide about the next steps.
Sweet. Are there any last second questions? If not, we'll move to next agenda item. Adding stocks will keep TCR above 150, maybe, perhaps. We'll have to see. Sweet. Okay, so I think for next agenda item, I need host.
Yes, that should be no problem.
Oh wait, it looks like I can already share my screen.
Cool.
Let's see. Oh no, you have to make me host. Never mind. It's not letting me.
Here we go.
Cool. Oh, one question, I guess, before we go to me. So I'm asked, can you tell how the Oracle works?
Maybe we can pass that question to Rick.
If Rick's here.
Yeah, so I'm actually just currently implementing the Oracle logic at the moment, and for a long time we've preferred Chainlink as our main Oracle, and we have been kind of looking into various fallback Oracle possibilities, and still not entirely settled, but we have one in mind that we prefer for now, and that's Telor. And yeah, it seems like a solid decentralized and immutable option for a fallback Oracle. So the tricky part now is just confirming the like the logic around that, and how and when we decide to fall back to it. So we have like a few ways to detect when Chainlink has failed. So we look at like when the price is frozen, hasn't updated for a long time, and also if it's like too big of a deviation from its previous price, or if it's like timestamp is kind of just like invalid, like it's in the future or something. And then we switch to the fallback, and we also have conditions for switching back to the main if the main one seems like it's working again. And that condition is when the Telor price and the Chainlink price are both live, current, and within a very small range of each other. Then we can kind of infer that, okay, if that's the case, then probably they're accurate, because otherwise either they're both broken and in sync, or they're accurate. So it's more likely they're accurate. So yeah, we're just currently implementing that logic at the moment.
Yeah, and I imagine when it's complete, we'll probably either release a blog post or a piece of documentation kind of outlining how it works. So, because I'm sure people will be asking a lot about it, especially as we near launch. One more question: when will we be open sourcing the code base? Probably near as we get closer to the launch, I imagine. We don't have, I don't think, a hard date on when we're going to open source the repo. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. For now, since we are kind of going long on time, as far as like agenda goes, I'll go over what the next agenda item is, and that is the new website that we launched today. Let me know if you can see the right screen. Is it like a YouTube video? Is this it? Or see it? Okay, cool, cool. So before I touch on the website, I just want to highlight some content that we released since the last office hours. One of those pieces of content is the Liquity versus Maker 10 key differences. So it's a pretty long video, but it's pretty cool, where Robert goes into detail about, you know, the main differences between Liquity and MakerDAO. So if anybody here is new and interested in those details, you can find those there. The other one is the video about decentralized front ends. Robert kind of walks through, why we chose to, not run our own front end, since that's a little different from other projects and how they approach product and approach the space. So if you want a little more details on those, watch that video. And there's also an associated blog post that kind of goes over the same information. So for whatever reason you don't like blog posts, or you don't like videos and you like blog posts, that's available. Okay, so the big thing that we've been working on over the past couple of weeks is the new website. For those of you who remember the old website, it was basically just a landing page with a quick overview of Liquity and some of its features. We've since expanded some of the content, improved the design a little bit, improved the look, and this is the new one. So we made this live like literally an hour or two ago, so it's pretty fresh. And let me know if my screen messes up at any point during this, so I can pause. But basically, we have a bit of information on the homepage. We've introduced a new short FAQ for beginners. And then, of course, our recent updates and stuff on the homepage. Nothing super exciting here. The main thing that's exciting is the FAQ, which is if you go to the website and you click on docs, it'll bring you here. So this is kind of the earliest version of our documentation. It is a Git book. We haven't ported it over to a repository yet, but we plan on doing that soon. So that way anybody can contribute or anybody can raise issues with it. We're definitely open to feedback on a lot of this. But basically we have a general FAQ for, Liquity, the system itself. We also have general FAQ for borrowing, stability pool and liquidations, LUSD price stability, front-end operators, staking, LQTY rewards and distribution. Some of these are not fully fleshed out because we're still ironing out details ourselves. So if you see anything that is maybe not complete, just know it's a work in progress. It's not totally finished. This is a living document of sorts. We've also provided all of the resources here. I know a lot of people ask for these, so there's kind of one place to get everything. The white paper, all kinds of different papers. The Trail of Bits audit is also here. So I guess everybody in this call is the first ones to kind of know that this is published and ready to be reviewed. So we haven't announced it on Twitter. So congratulations, I guess, everybody. You're the first ones to know that this is available if you go to the Git book. We'll end up sharing it publicly, I think, in the next few days. Oops, I just made my chat large. Okay, so we also have these unfinished sections. So the SDK section and the bug bounty section, those will come later. They're not totally complete, just like, the rest of this. But if you're going through this and you see questions that either one, don't make sense, or two, you think there's a better way to ask it, please let us know, because some of these we made up and we know a lot about the system. And so the questions we made up are maybe not the best or the, optimal approach. So feel free to reach out and give feedback on that. Cool. So we also have a features page, which basically, again, this is a brief overview of Liquity, the whole system, basically the benefits and the different features that make it unique. So if somebody's asking about Liquity and you don't want to send them to documentation, this might be the page you send them to. The next page is the front end page, which again gives kind of some more information. I know some of you in here are interested in running front ends or totally planning on running front ends. So there might be some information you haven't seen yet on here, or maybe some clarifying ideas on stuff that was maybe a little vague before. One thing you'll also notice is this active front end operators index. This is something that is not set in stone, but we hope to finalize, especially as we get near launch. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, one, to share their front end in a place that sort of aggregates all Liquity front ends, but also a place for new users to kind of pick and choose, what front end they're interested in using. And then last but not least, we have an About Us page with just the team and advisors and partners and stuff like that. We maybe should have pulled the 2017 move where we got one person to pose in different outfits, and that was all of our headshots, but we decided against it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions about the new site or the docs, or you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to let us know. Isn't the job taken by you? Yeah, I guess the job is taken by me. So that's not such a recent update. We can change that. let's see. Let me stop this. Yeah, if anybody has any questions about that, I ran through it kind of quick, just for the sake of time. So feel free to ask away. Or if there's any other questions more generally, feel free to ask those. Bandro said, nice design. Appreciate it. We're also open to feedback on the design front. Anything else that I missed? I don't think so. Cool. Will the recording be circulated? Yes, I'm recording it, so I'll try to upload it to to YouTube tonight or tomorrow, something like that. We'll make sure to get it out soon. That way, anybody who missed it can kind of catch up. We know that it's hard to coordinate across a bunch of different time zones. Is it possible to run a front end already? So it's kind of possible. You can run the dev UI, the testnet UI. That's what people have been sort of spinning up already to kind of get familiar with the system. But there are some things that are going to change. And I know that the middleware library is still a work in progress. The technical documentation is still a work in progress. Robert or Rick, if there's anything else that you think is really important for potential front end operators to know, feel free to hop in there.
So I think the middleware is more or less done, but what's lacking is the documentation.
Yeah.
And we just decided to, in order to speed up the process for at least technical people who are interested to roll their own thing, like basically to create a front end using our middleware. So Donnie is working hard on getting some comments in so that it should be possible, given like some technical understanding, to mess around with the middleware and create your own front end. But eventually in the next few weeks, so I think this should be ready early next week, but then we need a bit more time to turn like the code or inline documentation into like a proper SDK with examples and more illustrations. So that will come as well, but it may take a few more weeks.
Yeah, and we also wanted to open up this call a little bit for any front end questions that people have, because over the past couple of, actually probably this the end of last week and then early this week, we've had a lot of people express interest in running a front end. So there's been some interesting questions, but if people have questions about that now, feel free to ask and we'll try to address some of them. There's a question.
Yeah, so I have a question about the front end stuff. So it looks really promising. So thank you for showing us here everything first. The question I have is mainly on how are we supposed to interact with the Liquity backend, or let's say smart contracts? Will there be like some sort of API or middleware layer where we can hook up the front end to? Basically.
Robert, do you want that one, or
Rick, maybe?
Rick.
Yes, there will be middleware. Yeah, and you can obviously use if you were to know the contract addresses, you could use just call it directly, call the functions directly. But the middleware functions are important for making the operations efficient, because we have this like hint system where you need to pass hints in the actual transaction to our system on the blockchain to make to keep the gas cost low, basically. And you can either use the exact middleware that we've created or just kind of replicate it. And we have plenty of like middleware functions that do that. Come up with it, calculate the right hint, and then call the backend contracts with it.
To confirm, is the middleware effectively just a bunch of JavaScript or TypeScript packages that wrap the smart contract interactions?
Exactly that, yeah. It's TypeScript wrappers, yeah.
Somebody asked, can you further expand on the concept of like a hint, or what is a hint?
Okay, yeah. So we have this like sorted list of troves in our system, which keeps all the troves in the system in order of their collateral ratio. And it's important that this sorted list always stays sorted. But what happens is when somebody changes their trove, the system needs to reinsert the trove at a new position because the collateral ratio may have changed. And if we were to do that naively, we would need to walk through the list and check to see if we found the right position to insert the trove. And obviously on Ethereum, that can be very expensive because you could walk a list of 1 million troves and it would be far too expensive gas-wise. So it's easier to calculate the right position off-chain using just some helper functions and like a read contract call. So just calling into the system and finding the right position, and then passing that hint for the right position to the actual on-chain transaction that will insert the trove where it needs to go.
If the hint is incorrect, will the transaction revert?
It will still do its best to find the right position. And it could be that the system kind of changes in between the transaction being formulated and confirmed on the blockchain, because another transaction could get in front and change the sorted list.
Would you say that, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
I was just going to ask, would you say that irrespective of the hint provided, the transaction's execution would be deterministic? So like if I provide an incorrect hint, I just pay for that in increased gas costs, or?
Yes, by deterministic.
So I mean, like if I kind of, played with the system a little bit and figured out that if I provide X hint, I can make it liquidate Y trove instead of A trove, or will the trove that is liquidated be the same irrespective of whether the hint provided is correct or not?
Okay, right. So the hints are only for reinsertion. So if somebody updates their own trove, it will be reinserted. We don't need hints for liquidations, because a liquidation either completely closes the trove or does nothing. So obviously somebody can pass the address of the trove they're intending to liquidate, and it will either liquidate that trove or not, depending on the system conditions.
But maybe one thing to add is that, I mean, there is like this kind of like failure or non-determinism that if like the way between, like if your hint is completely off, then it may happen that there are just too many troves on your way to reach like the final position that it would eventually run out of gas. Like even though you're maybe like setting like the gas limit as high as there is gas in a block, even then it could happen that it fails, because I mean, if there are like hundreds of thousands of troves in the system, eventually that would not scale. But I mean, with having this kind of off-chain link generation mechanism and at least some reasonable gas price that you provide, there should be like a limited number of pending transactions that would come in between. So the error, or by which the hint can be off, would be bounded by the mempools of like the Ethereum nodes. And by just setting the gas price high enough, you should probably be able to always get your transaction in a way that even though there is maybe like a difference, the hint would still, or the system could still like get through the list to the right position.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also I would add to like address like the original question that in case of success, the result is deterministic. So the only thing that can happen is it fails or it succeeds. But if it succeeds, the result will always be the same no matter what hint you provide. Because that was kind of what you were asking initially, I think.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sweet. So we got another question. It might have gotten answered in the whole conversation, but it was, can the ABI be published or should it be developed based on middleware? And I think Chris answered, like, middleware is probably the way to go, but I mean, you could interact with the contracts directly, but it's just probably not ideal for most front ends, I would have to guess. There was another question. Why do you need them sorted after the recent update?
Yeah, so sorry.
You can take it.
Go ahead, Robert. Okay.
So, I mean, that's right. So with the liquidations, or for the liquidations, we don't need this sorted list anymore, but we still have the redemptions in our system, which are still like basically made in order of ascending, or in ascending order of collateralization ratio. So there we still need the hints, because we want to make it so that we can start or we can redeem from the troves that are at the bottom end of the sorted list. So that's why we still need the list.
All right, sweet. Is there any other pressing questions?
I was wondering if you like anticipate using the name Liquity when buying front-end domains and stuff, or is this something you are not liking?
Do you mean like people have been using Liquity in the name of their domain and stuff? Like, is it?
Yes.
I think off the top of the head, obviously it's not perfect. It would be cool if people came up with unique names for their front ends. I think it's one of those things that's also just kind of unavoidable. People are going to find, some way to, we can't buy like every single Liquity domain or something like this. So I think most people are, either probably going to have a name that's close or try to find names that are close. I think one of the big things that's important is, from our end, is communicating as much as we can that, we are not running front ends, and that it would be nice if people kind of, even if you use the Liquity name in your front end domain or something, come up with some unique look or branding or whatever else for the front end. It would be nice for us if you did that, but I understand that not everybody's going to. But I think a lot of it's just going to fall on communication from our side, because some of that stuff is just really, really hard to account for or fully prevent.
And another question I have is like, how secure is your web server supposed to be? Like what is the worst thing that could happen if someone hacks your server where the front end is running on?
Rick or Robert, do you guys have an answer? I'm not totally privy to like web security or anything, so I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I suppose the worst thing is the hacker could make it such that the transactions aren't what they're purported to be. The user would think they're doing X and they'd actually be doing Y. And I'm sure, yes, if that happened, there could be ways that could be gamed. Yeah. But that's just kind of part of the, it's up to the front ends to manage the security.
Yeah, that's kind of any front end application, right? Especially one that interacts with Ethereum or any other blockchain. I think, if you're planning to run a front end, security should be at top of mind. Vandra asks, if by chance something unpredictable happens to the system, since it's algorithmically self-governable, is there some kind of like dead man switch? Is there anything like that in the system, I guess, in a worst case scenario?
There isn't. So yeah, I mean, we opted for this kind of extreme approach of being immutable, and I mean, having like an admin kill switch would be like the least favorable kind of governance. Yeah, I think the way we built this system is that I mean, maybe it won't be as efficient as we would hope it, because I mean, you never know until you try it. But I think the main mechanisms are set in a way, and we have simulated them, that even if maybe some of the parameters are not like fully optimal, the system as a whole should still work. Like we did like simulations both for basically when the recovery mode is triggered, when the system becomes under collateralized. On the one hand, we did that with Gauntlet. We also did simulations for price stability, how the LQTY and the LUSD tokens price and market cap would evolve over time. That's a separate thing. Like you can find the workbooks in the technical resources section of the docs page. And
did I lose a connection, or did Robert lose connection? Okay, cool. We'll have to see what he says when he comes back. But I think the short answer is like the ultimate kill switch is that it just like worst case scenario happens and then everybody leaves. By the way, Robert, we lost you in the middle of your explanation.
I think I'm back.
Yeah,
maybe one
back.
that, I mean, there is also like in the extreme worst case that we could build like a new system and deploy it in parallel and let people migrate. Obviously, that's not the most like the preferable scenario, but it's technically possible.
If I could ask a question off the back of what Moritz asked, I think, yeah, front-end security is like a real concern. And, you know, particularly in the case where you have, you know, some funny business in the front-end layer itself, such that what the user is presented is not what they ultimately, you know, commit to on the chain. And that problem is not so much of a problem when you have a canonical front end, you know, where a user knows where to go and it's a trusted place and everything else. And so I'm curious to understand how you plan on directing new users who perhaps are not familiar with Liquity and kind of the decentralized front end approach. They're probably going to come to the protocol kind of web presences to find front ends. And yeah, how do you plan on directing users to maybe not canonical, but trusted front ends that, you know, won't rug pull them in the long term?
Yeah, so one way we've been thinking about that is, like I showed earlier, it'll be almost like an index or like this search page where we basically try to aggregate different front ends, and we're still thinking about the like optimal system for getting front ends added to that. But what users will be able to do, hopefully if we can get it all implemented properly, is like filter front ends by various different things that they might be interested in, right? So one of those might be the kickback rate. One of those might be how long has this front end been around? One of those might be, you know, what features do they have? So there's probably all of these different sort of filters we can try to apply to this thing so users can kind of curate their experience. The other thing is that when in doubt, again, this is going to be a communication thing on our end, but when in doubt, we hope people sort of ask the right questions, right? Like come into Discord, and if, you know, this new thing pops up and it feels too good to be true, hopefully people understand that it probably is. And we've been bouncing another idea around, I got to pull up the chat logs, but, you know, we've been bouncing another idea around regarding basically a way for people to sort of verify transactions before they like sign them, maybe like a tool on the side. This will be something like post-launch. It's not a super focus right now, but that's another thing we've been thinking about. So there's a couple ideas at the top of the head that I think can mitigate some of that. Ultimately, it will require due diligence on behalf of the user, which is sometimes, obviously that's a practice you want to encourage, but not everybody does it. I hope that answers some of the question, but of course we're more than open to, you know, different feedback and different ways of trying to, you know, help people along. It won't be as simple as like, go use this interface or something like that, because that's not something we want to do. It's not good for competition. It's not good for the way that we've sort of set up the system. Cool. Uniswap has achieved to both have a canonical front end that is trusted by users. Why did you consider this middle ground solution less desirable? So basically they're asking, like, it seems like the question asked in chat was, and maybe this is for you, Robert, is like, what was kind of the original inspiration for why you chose the decentralized front end approach? Like whenever you decided to go forward with that method and come up with an incentive mechanism, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think there are multiple reasons for it. Like one is that, I mean, obviously, if you just, like when we started this project, like there were a few DeFi projects already out there, like just using their own interface, like InstaDev, Zero, and they weren't like in a very early phase at best when we came up with this idea. And so back then, like the question was, yeah, maybe you just do your own front end, but then it could also be interesting to, from a like affiliate marketing or from a promotional perspective, to make it so that you have like second level marketers doing the job for you, and you can basically incentivize them so that they would like propagate the system or make it popular by promoting it in any way. And we would, of course, then reward them, like the protocol would reward them. So that's like one aspect to it. The other is like censorship resistance, where just the fact of being decentralized on many front ends makes it impossible to take you down, which also leads me like to the last consideration, which is just the legal one. And there, I mean, you should be careful. Like, I mean, the current legal environment is changing. Like, it's hard to anticipate what will happen. And even though we currently think that we could potentially do everything ourselves, it's not clear how that would evolve. So it makes sense to basically like make it as decentralized as possible. So there is not one operator, there are many operators, and it's not just one operator that is also like the governor and the developer and just one team that built everything and is running everything. So yeah, there are a couple of reasons which led us to this decision.
Sweet. And I think that puts us right at the hour mark. So I want to be conscious of people's time. If there's like any pressing questions or like last minute questions, feel free to ask in the Discord or shoot us an email or something like that. Most of you have a way to contact us, which is good. Yeah, I don't have many closing thoughts. Thanks everybody for coming in. Hopefully we can come up with some sort of like stricter schedule for these. That way it's easier to follow along, but who knows how that will go up until launch.